Hi, everybody. So this video is a recap of what we did in class this week. We're going to be looking at how to visualize the language of Shakespeare, how to ping and new coin and fresh mint words, how we can look at the logic of a speech and convey the thought processes, share the thought processes with the audience through being aware of the logical sequential progression of the speech, and also touching base on the issue which the video that's embedded on this week's Moodle page from John Barton, Passion versus Intellect, on issues that come from that subject. Okay, so first of all, I want us to talk about scansion and our checklist number 2. You'll see at the end of this PowerPoint, I've brought together all the elements to create your full-blown checklist number 2, but this is a starting point. A number of you are still feeling a little perplexed by iambic pentameter, and that's absolutely fair enough, because when you haven't done it before, it can seem just a little bit overwhelming. So there are some simple things to think about it. You look at the line, count the syllables. Are there 10 syllables? There might actually be 11 or 12 syllables, but if consistently over the course of the speech there are 10 syllables per line, then you can bet your bottom dollar that is iambic pentameter. Looking back on that speech that we had last week from Helena, how happy some or other some can be. Through Athens I am thought as fair as she, etc., etc. The 10 syllables then go into 5 beats. How happy some or other some can be. Through Athens I am thought as fair as she. And you'll see that I put all of this down on last week's recorded PowerPoint. When, however, there are irregular verse lines, 11 syllables or 12 syllables, you might find it difficult to scan. Now, I believe, and John Barton does, and many Shakespeare scholars, that this is often intentional, because when a character has an 11 or 10 syllable line, it can convey certain emotions, certain distresses, the idea that the thoughts are tumbling out, or indeed that the character is trying to keep the thoughts in. So we'll look at that in some detail further on in this video. I want you to think, though, as we talk about these extra syllables, what that might mean for your character. Now, a very simple way of asking yourself how discombobulating having extra syllables can be is to go back to that very first line we had of Helena, how happy some or other some can be. Now, the word o'er, as we discussed last week, is actually over, but to make the line scan, over, 2 syllables, has been turned into 1 syllable. But let's just see for a moment what happens if you don't do that elision, and indeed we have the extra syllables. How happy some over, some other, some can be. It just feels really wrong and weird. There are no lines in Shakespeare that are quite so badly scanned, but there are some lines, and we'll talk about that later when we look at Titus Andronicus and Macbeth. There are some lines where it's really clear that the rhythm and the scansion is slightly skewed for a deliberate character purpose. So that's something for you to think about. Okay, first of all, though, I want us to address the issue of visualization. Now, last week we talked about ways that you can visualize or have a different emotion about language. You can feel language differently through taste or smell or color or texture. And as I said last week, it's very important that once you have those sensations in your mouth, somebody said that how is chocolate flavored coffee, that the actor is not trying to portray chocolate-flavored coffee. It's simply that that exercise has made you look at the word in a different way, feel the word in a different way. Once the actor has done that, you then discard it. So you're never standing on stage thinking about chocolate-flavored coffee. Never do that. It is an exercise, though, in the imagination, so that the actor can incrementally learn to visualize the word. And as you visualize the word, so a certain in the moment quality happens. So if we look at this speech from Titus Andronicus, we can see what I mean. For now I stand as one upon a rock environed with a wilderness of sea. Now, when I played this part back in September, every single night at the instantaneous moment that I said, for now I stand upon a rock environed with a wilderness of sea, at every performance, at that exact moment, an image like this came into my mind. So when I said, I stand as one upon a rock environed with a wilderness of sea, I was actually on that rock. There was a solidity to what I was saying because my whole being was in that place at that moment. And so by visualization, you can make language speak to you in a way that it wouldn't otherwise. The actor, by visualizing language, can make the language alive because it is in the moment. And it's very important that it's in the moment, that you don't start off the speech thinking, okay, now I've got to visualize a rock, for now I stand as one upon a rock. Or you don't think, okay, for now I stand as one, now visualize the rock upon a rock. It's not like that at all. If you do that, you let the energy and the flow of the line drop. What it is visualizing on the word. And so if we look through this entire speech, expecting ever when some envious surge will in his brinish bowels swallow him, let's think about how rich that language is. The alliteration of brinish bowels, the open vowel sounds of swallow, that strange OW, almost diphthong at the end. And so these images, well, analogous images, came into my mind. There's Kronos eating his children. There's an image from Hieronymus Bosch of limbo going into hell. The idea of being swallowed and sucked down. So try now just to think about the word swallow, close your eyes and see what comes into your mind. And try to say swallow and think of that image at the same moment. What that does then is make the language live. You're not just saying in his brinish bowels swallow him. The brinish bowels, the bowels actually start to have meaning. They start to have depth. Now, this technique takes some time to learn, so don't be concerned if it takes you a little while. And for those of you who have difficulty visualizing, I know that there are some people who just can't do it, don't worry. What you can do instead is think about the sound of the word, the alliteration of brinish, bowel, swallow, these big surging words. And being aware of those words is the first part of fresh minting or new coining a word. Now, if we were dealing with naturalistic acting, the way that we make a word seem new is usually to stick in ums and ers and you know. So, for instance, for now I stand, like one upon a rock who's like environed with a like wilderness of sea. Yeah, well, you might get away with that in naturalistic acting, though you cannot get away with it in Shakespeare. I have had the misfortune once to work with an actor who consistently peppered her language with, you know, and I mean. And apart from screwing up the scansion, what it also does is screw up the energy of the line. It makes us look at the actor. It makes us look at their process. It doesn't make us feel and think and listen to the language. Because if you listen to the language, you are at one with the character. And being at one with the character, you are at one with the play. So that's why it's so important for the actor's job in Shakespeare to convey the language, because everything comes from that. So moving on, here we see some different visualizations, but also some different things that can happen with the meter. Shall thy good uncle and thy brother, and by the way, I'm not acting, I'm just saying the words. Shall thy good uncle and thy brother Lucius and thou and I sit around about some fountain, looking all downwards to behold our cheeks, how they are stained as meadows, yet not dry, with miry slime left on them by some flood. Okay, so here we have the visualization, miry slime. It's fantastic. So at the moment of saying fountain, I did imagine a fountain very much like this, a gloomy fountain somewhere in the woods where it's dark and dank and you can feel mosquitoes biting you. And the miry slime, the slime is a wonderful image to think about, how almost onomatopoeic slime is. It actually sounds and feels like the thing that it is describing. So that visualization was important. But I want us to think now about the irregularity of the beat. So let's count the syllables. Shall thy good uncle and thy brother Lucius and thou and I sit around about some fountain. And then we get on to regulars. Looking all downwards to behold our cheeks, how they are stained as meadows, yet not dry, with miry slime left on them by some mud. Now, what do the 12 syllables do? Okay, so if we're putting the 12 syllables into 5 beats, this is what happens. Shall thy good uncle and thy brother Lucius. It's kind of like there's a sort of half weird beat at the end. And thou and I sit around about some fountain. Fountain. Okay. Now, in terms of scansion, what you can do, what I certainly did, was where we have a round, I knocked off the A to make it round. So it's much easier. And thou and I sit round about some fountain. So there you go. Cut off the A. We're cooking with gas in terms of scansion, and that's allowed. But we still can't get rid of that strange sense of the extra syllables and the half extra beat at the end of the line. This is what's called a feminine ending. Why it is called this, I have absolutely no idea. But I want you to think for a moment about what this can mean for the character. Shall thy good uncle and thy brother Lucius and thou and I sit round about some fountain? There's a sense, or at least a sense I feel, of trying to contain the thought, but the thought is about to burst out. And don't forget the situation of this. Titus's sons have been sentenced to death unfairly. His other son has been exiled. His daughter is standing in front of him with her tongue ripped out and her hands cut off, having been brutally raped. And poor old Titus, in about 2 minutes, is going to have his hand cut off. So the stakes are incredibly high. But yet Titus isn't at this stage weeping and wailing and moaning and all of those things. Instead, he's trying very hard to speak a line of iambic pentameter, but it is almost as though the emotion and the tension of these lines are getting out of the 5 beats. They're getting out of the 10 syllables. They're getting unwieldy, and he's got to push down the lid on them. So you can actually look at those extra syllables and say they are telling us something about the character. They are telling us that the character is desperately trying to hold things in. Or in another speech, it might be saying that the character has a pile of thoughts tumbling out and they can't possibly contain them into 10 syllables and 5 beats. These principles of scansion absolutely apply to lines with 11 beats or 12 beats, but there will always be slight variance. And I want us to have a little think about how these variants can actually change the way that we can manipulate the verse. So we've got regular verse all down here. Hang on, where we are. And thou and I sit round about some fountain, the extra syllable. Now you could scan this, looking all downwards to behold our cheeks, looking all downwards to behold our cheeks, but actually what comes naturally is looking all downwards to behold our cheeks. So what we've done there is we've just altered the scansion a bit. Instead of being dee-dum, we've got dee-dee, dum-dum. And what that does is actually put an emphasis on looking and on the speed of looking and on the intensity of the emotion, and then all downwards, the long beat, the dums on those allow us to go down into the words. You don't have to change the scansion like this at all. It is absolutely okay to have looking all downwards to behold our cheeks, but it does seem just a little bit fake. So keep that up your sleeve as an option. You have to believe that after last week, you have iambic pentameter in you. Now, some of you, when we were doing exercises in class, were maybe overplaying the rhythm. You were still going, for instance, shall thy good uncle and thy brother Lucius and thou and I sit round about some fountain. So all of that dee-dum, 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 do away with now. Just forget about it. You have to believe that the rhythm is in you. So you do not have to play dee-dum, 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 dee-dum. What you have to do now is make the language live. Make it have fresh air to it. New coin it, fresh mint it. Make us listen to it. So that means that you might need to change the scansion just a little bit. Because if I say looking all downwards to behold our cheeks, it's just weird. Whereas looking all downwards to behold our cheeks, oh, that's okay. That's closer to the way we speak. So if you do come across slightly irregular lines, don't worry, but look at it in the context of the whole speech and what your character is going through. And we'll see at the end of this little presentation, when we will look at a speech of Macbeth's, that exemplifies this with knobs on. All right, so now I want us to talk about fresh minting and pinging language. If you haven't done so already, please do look at the Moodle page for this week, and you will see that there are 4 different versions of Viola's ring speech from Twelfth Night. What I want us to do now is look in detail at the first one. This is Judi Dench, who's talking us through she's performing the speech. And I want to stop and start to try to explain to you what the art of pinging is. Basically, it's using the inflection, as opposed to the inflection to make a word seem new, as though it's simply occurred to you. or occurred to you, or occurred to you. The very fact of the different modulations of my voice then, that it wasn't just occurred to you, but it was da-da, 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 da-da. What that does is enables the language to be fresh, to be vibrant, and consequently helps the audience to listen. So let's just have a look at Judi Dench for a while, and I'll stop and start and we'll discuss certain elements of what she's doing.
Most of the soliloquies we've looked at have a strong and clear through line and argument. But sometimes the situation which a soliloquy explores is much more muddled. And sometimes it may be a terrific mixture of, say, comedy and seriousness. So Judy, come now and let's do Vala's ring soliloquy. Here's your ring.
Thank you.
She's disguised as a boy. Malvolio has brought her a ring from Olivia, who's fallen in love with her. So what are your main feelings when you come to this soliloquy?
Well, it's a wonderful opportunity to share just what a dilemma she's in with the audience. And she actually can speak directly to the audience and say, this is the situation I'm in. And how would you like to it if you were in this situation?
Right. Share.
Okay, so that's an important thing. Sharing, but also is very important, the idea of the soliloquy, that the actor can actually talk to the audience. The actor can share with the audience. And so if you have a soliloquy, think about it as an act of direct communication. Now, a soliloquy, as opposed to a speech, is when it's just you, just your character on stage, talking to the audience. In some productions, you'll see that actors do this as if they're talking to themselves, but it's infinitely more effective if you use this opportunity to talk to the audience. Theatre is, after all, artifice. We all know it's a play. We all know you're speaking Elizabethan and Jacobean English. So we don't need verisimilitude. That means something that's trying to be exactly like real life. What we need is communication. And you'll remember over the last couple of weeks with you, I've been saying that the key skill, the key role of the actor is to communicate, or as John Barton says, to share. So this point that Dench makes about being able to talk to the audience and share her thoughts is really important. Now, let's have a think about how she starts this speech.
Our word is share. I think if you go for the mixture, share the mixture of the funny side of the situation and the horrors of it, so that it's a mixture all the time of the pain and the comedy.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll try. I left no ring with her. What means this lady?
Okay, that in itself is a very significant opening. I left no ring with her. What means this lady? It's right there. It's right there in the moment. There's no faffing around. She's not huffing and puffing and breathing and getting into character. She's just right there with the question, what means this lady? I left no ring with her. What means this lady? It's really matter of fact. And that's what we call being on voice. In other words, she has these words. She's not thinking around these words. She's thinking with these words, on these words, and speaking with full voice on these words. This is a purely technical thing, but when you develop your skills as an actor, you'll see how important it is. If you contrast this to the last video, the video with the emerging actress, probably straight from drama school, you'll see the breathiness that I'm talking about. What that does is kills the energy. Many of you who will have done VCE drama or done drama at school will have been, unfortunately, taught bad habits, and breathiness is one of the most common. So listen to Dench and see how she is on voice. Okay, let's continue.
Fortune forbid. My outside have not charmed her.
Okay, now we have the pinging. Think first of the alliteration. Fortune forbid. So we have that, she's playing the double Fs, fortune forbid, not fortune forbid, fortune forbid. Now it might seem as though that's slightly emphatic, but it's not. It's really not with this language, because the fortune forbid makes us listen. And then the way that she says outside and charmed her. We really feel this. So let's just go back over that little moment again and listen to how on voice she is, but also how she pings these words. Fortune, forbid, outside, charmed. They're all fresh words that are coming to Viola and spoken by Dench in the moment.
Fortune forbid. My outside have not charmed her. She made good view of me. Indeed, so much that sure methought her eyes had lost her tongue, for she did speak in starts distractedly.
Okay, so now what we have with Dench is that there is a speed up of the energy as Viola is thinking. And it makes sense. Ria, in one of the classes, you said, I think it was you, Ria, said that as she speeds up, sometimes it's easy to lose the progression of thought. Well, that is absolutely valid comment. And indeed, the actor needs to be aware of that. So bringing up the energy and the momentum of the scene is not the same as speeding. What it is here, in this case, is that Viola is suddenly thinking, oh my God, what's happening? Oh, she looked at me, she thought I was good. The thoughts are starting to pick up in momentum. And so therefore, the actor picks up the momentum as well. I want you also to observe the difference between eyes and tongue. That's the antithesis that we were talking about last week, where you have two things which are held up in contrast with each other. Eyes, tongue. So playing that antithesis makes us listen afresh to these words. In other words, the antithesis helps us to ping the language.
She loves me, sure. The cunning of her passion invites me, and this churlish messenger, none of my lord's ring why he sent her none. I am the man. If it be so as 'tis, poor lady, she were better love a dream.
Okay. Now another thing. So there's clearly a change in emotion here. If 'tis so as 'tis, poor lady, she had better love a dream. Well, Viola at this point is probably empathizing with Olivia, because Viola herself is, poor love, the victim of unrequited love at this stage anyway. She sits like Patience on a monument, smiling at grief, as she sees her beloved Orsino, her boss, who's in love with Olivia. Now, Dench doesn't act around the words. The emotion, such as it is, comes on the word, through the word, poor wretch. We don't have a huffing and puffing. Poor wretch. It's just on the word. So that does two things. It means that we are in a way forced to listen to the language because we are not being interrupted by extraneous huffing and puffing or acting with a capital A. It also means the momentum of the speech is contained, it continues, even though the pace starts to slow. So that thing of not allowing yourself to drop the energy, even if you drop the pace, is very important. And you don't drop the energy if you keep the language alive.
Disguise, I see thou art a wickedness, wherein the pregnant enemy does much. How easy is it for the proper false in women's waxen hearts to set their forms? Alas, our frailty is the cause, not we. Afraid of such we be. How will this fadge? My master loves her dearly, and I, poor monster, fond as much on him, and she mistaken seems to dote on me. What will become of this? As I am.
Okay, so there too we have lots of different changes. We have change in tempi. We also have change in what is actually coming through the face, through the eyes in this language. Poor creature. Now, taken in isolation, I'm thinking this is a rehearsal room in the Channel 4 studios on the South Bank. Poor creature might seem too much. But think of the alternative. And I, poor creature, fond as much on him. Well, we lose it. And the poor creature is important. So I want you to contemplate the slightly radical thought that you actually can't overemphasize Shakespeare. Now, this is not the same as exaggerating things. It's not the same as overacting. What it is that to convey the language, you can really ping these words, poor creature, dotes as much on him. Think too, though, of the contrast with the very matter-of-fact, prosaic, how will this fadge? There's no, again, huffing and puffing. There's no extraneous laughter around the line. Everything comes on the line. So there might be parts of this speech that I think, oh yeah, okay, hasn't quite convinced me. Not because I'm being churlish about Judi Dench, but just because I'm aware that in 35 odd years, playing styles have changed considerably. She seems a bit posh to us, probably. But be aware that what she's doing in this speech is an absolute masterclass of technical proficiency. So watching this type of speech is highly beneficial for you in terms of working out how you can ping the language and how you can stay in the moment. Now, I want us to think.
Most of the
thank you. I want us to think about logic. Okay, so if you haven't had a chance to watch it yet, or if you weren't in class when we watched it together, I'd like you to watch the video, which is also on the Moodle page, Passion versus Intellect, where Patrick Stewart does two versions of the same speech from Titus Andronicus. And this is what he's saying. If there were reason for this miseries, then into limits could I bind my woes. Now, I won't go through the whole thing because, frankly, you can read it for yourselves. And if you want to see different versions of it, you'll also see, again, if you haven't seen it already, that there's a short video, a compilation I've done on the Moodle site of 4 different actors playing this speech. The reason I'm bringing this up now is because I want you to think about how the logic can progress the thought, which can progress the character and can progress the story. This is a little bit tricky in terms of its logic. It is highly logical, but it goes on for a very, very long time. So Titus is still in the same position with his daughter raped and mutilated, and now his hand has been cut off. And he's just called to heaven and he said, heaven, you've got to listen to our prayers or we're going to envelop the sun with fog. And his brother, Job's comforter, says, but yet let reason govern thy lament. In other words, don't go over the top. You've got to be reasonable about this. Well, you know, think about the situation. Titus's hand's been cut off and his daughter's been mutilated and raped. There's not a lot you can be reasonable about. In the video with John Barton, he says that very aptly, that the emotions of this situation are so great that in real life you could not put these into words, but yet Shakespeare does. And so our duty is not to act around them, not to act lots of woe is me and screaming with the pain of a hand being cut off, but actually to act the logic, because through that we actually see the emotion. So this is the way the thought goes together. Let reason govern thy lament, says his brother. If there were reason for these miseries, then into limits could I bind my woes. In other words, if it was rational that I was suffering that much, then yes, I could be rational and contain all my sorrows into limits. He leaves that thought then, and then he goes into this other one about the force of nature. When it rains, when heaven doth weep, the earth overflows, it floods. When there's a hurricane, the sea waxes mad, huge waves, tidal waves, flowing, ebbing and waning. And they threaten the sky, they're threatening the welkin with his big swollen face. The sea is so huge with this tsunami that it's right up there reaching the sky. And now Titus goes with this line back up to that. Wilt thou have a reason, picking up on reason, for this coil? Now it's not the coil, i.e. the trouble of Titus's hand and his daughter. It's the coil of nature, of the hurricane, of the tsunami, of the flooded fields. So he has taken this reason all the way through this image. This is an allegory, if you like, for his woes, but it's also a description of the force of nature. Now let's see how he applies it to himself. No allegory, no simile, it is sheer metaphor. I am the sea, hark how her sighs do blow. So we have I and her as the antithesis. She is the weeping welkin, I the earth. So she and I in contrast, and she and I up there. So this thought is the conclusion of all of this. This is what nature does. And now look, I'm nature, she's nature. And because of this, my sea must be moved with her sighs. In other words, when she breathes a hurricane, I must become a tsunami. My earth, with her continual tears, must become a deluge, overflowed and drowned. The incredible rainstorm coming from her tears absolutely drown me. I am a field that is drowned with her tears. So Kind of interesting, isn't it? That we have this, all of this is one logical progression that holds this to come to the conclusion here. So for the actor, there's a lot to hold on to in your brain. And let's think about the enjambment. Well, how many sentences do we have that are just self-contained thoughts? Well, here's an enjambment. There were reasons for these miseries, then into limits could I bind my woes. Okay, say that's one. Remember that punctuation is arbitrary from usually academic editors, not from theatre practitioners. When heaven doth weep, doth not the earth o'erflow? Okay, one thought, one sentence. If the winds rage, doth not the sea wax mad, threatening the welkin with his big swollen face? One thought, two lines, one enjambment. And wilt thou have a reason for this coil? One thought, one sentence. But of course, this sentence is bringing in all the thoughts from here. I am the sea, hark how her sighs do blow. One thought, one sentence. She is the weeping welkin, I the earth. One thought, one sentence. But yet the thought carries on with, then must my sea be moved with her sighs. Then must my earth with her continual tears become a deluge o'erflowed and drowned. And you can carry this on into enjambment, for why my bowels cannot hide her woes, but like a drunkard must I vomit them. So, very, very interesting in the way the thought is carried through, when the thought is contained in just one line, or when the thought carries over several lines. And the fact that there is just one thought really from here all the way down to here, except there are lots of sub-thoughts within that. So as you work on your speech, do that sort of homework. Try to work out the logical progression. Certainly look at the antitheses. Now here then is a way that we can think about pinging this. So you highlight the important vowels, the important words, the nouns, heaven, earth, winds, sea, the important adjectives, mad, that's sort of more of a participle, so we won't worry about big, swollen. And let's think about the verbs, weep or flow, rage, wax, mad. Then the participles, threatening. I am the sea, the simplicity of that, but the visualization that you can have with it. So by highlighting the important nouns, you can really see them in your head. You can color the verbs, you can think about the logic, and your inflection can keep the modulation interesting. When heaven doth weep, doth not the earth o'erflow? Okay, that's fine, but the rhythm is da 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 da. When heaven doth weep, doth not the earth o'erflow? Okay, that might be a bit over the top, but you see what I mean. Da 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 da. That at least has a little bit more energy, shall we say, to the line. So all of those things in terms of keeping that, sorry, I'll go back to the next page. All of those things in terms of keeping your awareness of the need to progress the logic, of the coloration of language, of the importance of specific verbs and nouns and adjectives and adverbs. If, by the way, you don't know what that means, a noun and a verb and an adjective and an adverb, and don't feel funny because I've had third years who don't know what they mean, look them up, get yourself an English grammar and make sure that you do know these terms, because you should have been taught them at school. They're also life skills that you need to know. So these elements of grammar and syntax. Take special care to look at them, to feel them, to colour them, and to fresh mint them. When heaven doth weep. When heaven doth weep. So that's a little example of fresh minting. At the very moment of saying it, the word is coming to me anew. And you think about how we think and speak most of the time. Most of the time, we don't really think about what we're going to say. It just pops out. Now, this is different for some of you who might, like I used to have a stammer, or you feel uncomfortable, you feel shy. I always used to and had a terrible stammer up until maybe my early to mid-20s. So if that's the case with you, then see this as a wonderful release, because Shakespeare's doing the work for you. So you don't have to worry about what you're going to say next, because you know, because your character knows, because Shakespeare has given you the words. All right, now I just want to finish off with another speech. We didn't do this in class, but one of you guys talked to me about it in an email, and it's such a good example. I want us to look at it. So this is a speech of Macbeth. And it's a tricky speech. It's a very difficult speech, but it's a very rewarding speech. Let's start off by counting out the syllables. If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well. Okay, 5 syllables. It were done quickly. If the assassination, 12 syllables, could trammel up the consequence and catch, 10. With his surcease success, but this, that, I'll say that again. With his surcease success, but this, what is going on in me talking about stammering? Okay, let's try this one last time. With his surcease success, that but this blow, regular, might be the be all and the end all here, regular, but here upon this bank and shoal of time. So it's actually pretty regular. We do have this oddness, the feminine ending with this line. It were done quickly of the assassination. It's a bit odd. But I want us to think about what we can do with the scansion of this and what the scansion does to tell us about Macbeth's state of mind. We can do the straightforward de-dum, 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 de-dum scansion. If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well. It were done quickly if the assassination. It all falls apart by the second line. So this is where you actually need to think, okay, I've got the meter in me. I can relax into it. What I need to think about now is what is happening. What are the given circumstances of this speech? What's the magic if? And what is the language telling me? So let's think about this first line then. What are the most important ways of looking at it? Well, there are many different ways of looking at it. We could start with the if. It's the hypothetical. If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well. In other words, if killing Duncan, if the action of killing Duncan was just over and done with in the moment that I'm doing it, then it would all be well. It would all be well. So he could be convincing himself, in which case the key words are if and then, because that is the temporal antithesis. If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well. But we could also look at the dones. If it were done, as in if it's over and done with when 'tis done, then 'twere well. Or we could look at the it. Let's think of what the it is. The it is taking a knife and sticking it into the guts of your king and your mentor. If it, as in the death of Duncan, if it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well. There are a multiplicity of ways we can look at this speech. None of them is wrong as long as they are based on an understanding of the logical progression of the speech and also the value of the words. So any actor, the first thing you have to do is to work out, okay, so what is Macbeth actually saying here? Now, any actor worth their salt, any student worth their salt will basically work out, without looking at No Fear Shakespeare, that he's saying, okay, well, if the murder was over and done with when I do it, then that would be great, because then we wouldn't have to worry. And nobody, frankly, would ever worry about hell, but we'd just forget all about it. But, you know, we still have to think about these things, don't we? And we, unfortunately, if we do something which is, if we spill blood, then it's going to come back to haunt us. And justice is actually going to show us it's a poison chalice. So there's lots of prevarication going on in Macbeth's mind at this stage. Now, you as the actor, you need to know the overall understanding of the speech, and it is quite a complicated speech. But you, when getting into the character, need to know what would be the most important elements for the character. So is it if and then? Is everything hypothetical? Or is it because he's obsessed with the thought of the murder? You know, don't forget, he's the one who sees the dagger in front of him. This is the dagger that I see before me. Or is it that he wants it to be over and done with? Any of those options is perfectly valid, but you as the actor, you have to decide. So if we change the options, then the scansion can also change, because your focus and intonation is going with a thought, and the scansion helps the thought. The scansion does not create the thought. If it were done when 'tis done, so that's regular scansion. If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well. What we have then is it. The focus is on it, the murder. But if you change the scansion like this, if it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well. So just changing, we've got the, if you think about it, if you do the maths, it's the same number of counts, but instead of having a long, we've got two little shorts there. If it were done. So done is in this scansion the most important thing. It were done quickly if the assassination. So here we have what we had in Titus Andronicus with Lucius. So you can do a regular scansion and you just sort of muddle through the last beat of assassination. But alternatively, you could do a similar thing. It were done quickly. It were done quickly. It were done quickly. So that slight difference of it were done quickly, it were done quickly. The slight change in scansion shifts the emphasis. So if you put those two lines together with our regular pentameter, we have, if it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well, it were done quickly. If the assassination could trammel up the consequence and catch with his surcease success, etc. Or the slightly different, more tense scansion. If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well, it were done quickly. If the assassination, etc., etc. So it's up to you. There is no one way to scan a line. What I've given you with de-dum, 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 de-dum is the very basics. And you have to have that in your body so that you understand then how you can play with the scansion. So you'll see here you have a multiplicity of possibilities, but it all comes from the situation of the character and also from the language itself. Finally, I want us to think about the number of enjambments here. And this is why this is so tricky. If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well, it were done quickly. One enjambment. And then halfway through this line, a new thought. If the assassination could trammel up the consequence and catch with his surcease success. And that's kind of odd, isn't it? Because it is a thought, but with no conclusion. In fact, his mind goes on to something else. But this blow might be the be and end, that be the be all and the end all here. But here, upon this bank and shoal of time, will jump the life to come. So all of that is one great big enjambment. It takes a lot of breath to get through that. And luckily you can use the punctuation. But what that one huge long enjambment does is show us that these thoughts are piling on top of Macbeth again, again, again. And actually grammatically, it's a bit all over the shop because he has a lot of subjunctive clauses. If this, if that, with no conclusion, then that would. Instead, we have the weirdness of things might be the be-all and the end-all here, but here, upon the bank of shoal of time, will jump the life to come. So what on earth is this? Upon the bank and shoal of time. Now, you can gloss it. You can say, oh yeah, you just sort of mean now. But actually, if you're specific, what it really shows us is the Macbeth's mind is all over the shop. He's saying here, because he's talking about Glamis Castle, where he's going to kill Duncan. And then, but here is a different here altogether. It's a very, very fascinating, confused speech, but hopefully not confusing if you actually observe the rhythm, you scan it in a way that makes sense for your logical progression. So I want to finish off then by just giving us an example of Ian McKellen's performance of this same speech. Did that come up? Is it going to come up? There we go.
If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. If the assassination could trammel up the consequence and catch with his surcease success. But this blow might be the be-all and the end-all here. But here, upon this bank and shoal of time, we jump the life to come. But in these cases, we still have judgment here, that we but teach bloody instruction, which being taught returns to plague the inventor. This even-handed justice commends the ingredients of our poisoned chalice to our own lips.
Okay, so what to say about that then? Well, it'll get still, as you listen to it, a complicated speech, even though, again, this is a masterclass in the performance of verse. But it would be very useful for you to look over that video again. And in fact, I'll post it up on the Moodle site for this week so that you can see what McKellen is doing in terms of the phrasing. There is an immediacy about it. Now, I have to confess, as I listen to it, I don't exactly follow his logic. And, you know, God knows I've been in Macbeth enough times to know what Macbeth is actually saying. But what I do get is his character coming through. I do get that he's pretty psychopathic. You can tell from that. But the way that he breaks up Circe's success, again, masterful technique, because he is pinging us. There is the danger with this speech, and there's the danger with McKellen's performance, that what we are seeing is generalized emotion because it is so particularly difficult a speech. But even from such a difficult speech that you might not understand straight away, you can tell what grabs you as a listener, how the way he breaks Circe's success, he plays with the sibilant S, actually hooks our ears. And there is an energy to it that hooks us too. And there is a sense of the verse being completely intrinsic in him. So that when the enjambment takes us over to half a line and a new thought starts halfway through that line, it's almost seamless. The verse is seamless. So have a look over this again and do recognize, acknowledge the sheer value of watching people performing Shakespeare, well or badly. As I said in the class, there's an awful lot that you can learn from watching the young woman who's straight out of drama school, the final video, because she's not very good. See what speaks to you. And don't forget all of the vast resources that the library has in terms of productions, recorded productions of Shakespeare. Just pop it into your search engine in the library, the play that you want to see, or go on Digital Theatre Online or Drama Online, and you will see the full range. It's all available via the library. Okay, guys, I will look forward very much to seeing your pieces next week. Final thing to say, please don't forget to make sure that you have light on your face. Do not have backlighting and don't have side lighting. We've got to be able to see you. Okay, guys, take care and have a lovely week. Bye-bye.